So there are some other interesting markets that are out there outside of, we've hit the defensive positions here, but some of the other ones that are available out there, there are top, we talked about this, the positional totals in this thing, how many X type of players are going to go in the first round, et cetera, et cetera. If you take a look, the defensive players overall, Stephen, are sitting here at 14 and a half as far as defensive players overall. I tend to lean a little bit. I think it's a dead on number, right? Like from what I've looked at and what I've seen, I think it's a dead on number. Not really one that I'm like looking a ton to kind of bet on here, but I do think the defensive backs drafted sitting at 5.5. I do think the over on 5.5 is pretty interesting because, of course, safeties count, as defensive backs in this. And so I do think that there's probably going to be 6 taken in the first round from kind of what I have been gathering. But again, this draft, man, you and I talked about this when we wrapped yesterday. I have had far more confidence in the last 3 drafts than I've had in this draft as to kind of how things are going to play out and kind of where players are going to go and team needs and where they might head with things. And there's a lot of teams with luxury picks this year that, they're pretty solid on both sides of the ball. So they could really just going to go anywhere. And I just don't have a super firm grasp on towards the back end of the first round. I think it gets super nutty.
I feel when it comes to like total defensive players or total offensive players, I feel if I'm going to bet one of those, I feel like I'd be most confident in the over. You said it was 14.5 on defensive players.
Yeah.
I feel like you'd be most confident over 14.5 on defensive players just by, let's just do some quick math here on the offensive players that we think are going to be drafted in the first round. 4 quarterbacks for sure, right? Are you of the opinion that Gibbs gets into the first round among running backs, or are you not sure about that?
I am not, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility strictly because of what we were talking about with these teams and kind of like
weapons and
kind of like what they have. Yeah. Just what they're able to do. Right. I mean, like, does Eckler force his way out of LA and the Chargers then all of a sudden need a running back, right? Like, I mean, so then that could change things, right? Like that could change the way we view things. Do the Cowboys know for sure that Pollard is not going to be ready for the season? We know they don't like Zeke's gone. So like, do they then at that point, try to go after one of these guys?
Also on a 1-year deal.
Yeah. There are some teams out there where I think it is a kind of a wild card type deal for them to take a running back, that's a non-Bijan Robinson, I should say, running back,
So if 2 running backs go in the first round, maybe we say only 4 wide receivers go in the first round. Is that fair?
I think that there's 5 because we know 4 for sure. Like, I think we know 4 for sure in Smith and Jigba, Flowers, Addison, and Johnson. That's it. Johnson has been kind of falling a little bit in a lot of these mocks. But like I was saying, like, so then that just leaves it open to, does Hyatt slip into the first round at some point? Does any of these other wide receivers slip into the first round? I think we're definite on 3, 4 likely, and then 5 is like not out of the realm of possibility.
Okay. And let's say worst case scenario, only 2 tight ends go in the first round.
Yeah.
Even though I do like Darnell Washington to get in there. Mm-hmm. And then you're on the under 5.5 offensive lineman, right?
It seems to me, if I'm looking at kind of how because, look, I do a very unofficial, I'm an idiot mock draft, right? Like one that I understand that like I have no business doing a mock draft. So currently I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I actually have 5 offensive linemen going.
Yeah, that's fair. That jives with your under 5.5.
Yeah,
that you talked about in the other pod.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're right on the bubble here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's
I have, and here's the worst part. So I have 5, but then I have like written to the side, like I actually kind of have 5.5 because I think I think Osiris Torrance is like this really kind of like borderline first rounder guy that somebody might look at and say, you know what, as opposed to taking the X best corner or the X best wideout, like let's just take an offensive lineman we can plug in and play from day one and just kind of like move on from there. So I think 5.5 is just kind of dead on with that number.
All right. Well, we've added that up. We've gone through the exercise, and we were a little split on a couple positions, but we hit on the under there for defensive players.
Cincinnati's taking a tight end for sure, right? Like that just makes too much sense.
Yeah, they did sign one in the offseason, but not exactly reliable. It does make sense. I mean, that's kind of where people have Darnell Washington maybe going as the third tight end in the first round. But I guess we've gone through this little elementary math exercise on adding up position totals for offense and don't really have a firm conclusion on betting over under on these positions because the back half of the first round is such a crapshoot, right? I think we could both kind of, especially this year more than others, I think we can kind of agree on that.
Yeah, I did want to say this top 31 market, the only one that I do think is interesting is what I did mention was if we do get to that fifth receiver, it's likely to be Jalen Hyatt, and he is plus 250 to go in the first round. I think that is at least semi-interesting, and there might be some people who actually
one, right?
What's
he's
that?
The one with the speed of the group of wide receivers in consideration in this draft. He's the fastest one,
yes,
right?
He's the take the top off guy.
Yeah.
And from what we're getting with Quentin Johnson kind of slipping, like starting to slip a little bit in all of this, I do wonder if that fourth wide receiver could end up being Hyatt. And if that was the case, then he kind of slips in somewhere in the first round as well. I like Hyatt at plus 250 to go inside the top 31 because, as you mentioned, he's just a little bit different from all these other dudes that are available, and there might be a team that finds a lot of value in that.